The morning sun was just starting to peek through the clouds when Zara pulled her car into the parking lot of Elite Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. She sat for a moment, looking at the building through her windshield. The academy looked impressive, from the outside with large windows showing glimpses of blue training mats inside. This was going to be her new home away from home, at least she hoped so. Zara had just moved to this city 3 weeks ago for her new job at a tech company. The move had been exciting but also overwhelming. Everything was different here. New apartment, new job, new people. And now she needed to find a new place to train. Jiu-Jitsu wasn't just a hobby for her. It was her stress relief, her community, and honestly, her passion. She grabbed her black gym bag from the passenger seat and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one more time. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore a simple t-shirt and athletic shorts. Nothing fancy, just ready to train. Taking a deep breath, she got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The heavy glass doors opened with a soft whoosh, and immediately she could hear the sounds that felt like home. The shuffle of feet on mats, the gentle thud of bodies hitting the ground, and the quiet conversations between training partners. The familiar smell of the mats mixed with the slight scent of cleaning supplies filled the air. Every jiu-jitsu academy had this same smell, and it always made her feel comfortable. The front area was clean and organized. Trophy cases lined one wall, filled with medals and awards from various competitions. Photos of the academy students at tournaments covered another wall. Everyone in the pictures looked happy and proud, which was a good sign. The reception desk sat in the center, where a young woman with short brown hair was typing on a computer. "Hi, there," the receptionist said with a genuine smile when she noticed Zara approaching. "Are you here for the trial class?" "Yes, I am," Zara replied, returning the smile. "I called yesterday and spoke with someone about trying out the advanced class tonight." "Perfect. I'm Kelly. Let me get you the paperwork." Kelly reached under the desk and pulled out a clipboard with several forms attached. "Just fill these out and we'll get you all set up. The advanced class starts at 7, so you have perfect timing." Zara took the clipboard and found a seat in the small waiting area. The forms were standard stuff she had filled out many times before at other gyms. Name, address, emergency contact, medical history, previous training experience. She paused, at that last section, thinking about how to explain her background. She had started training jiu-jitsu 6 years ago, almost by accident. A friend had dragged her to a trial class at a gym near her college, insisting she needed to try something new. Zara had been skeptical at first. She wasn't particularly athletic growing up and had never been interested in fighting or martial arts. But something about jiu-jitsu clicked for her immediately. Maybe it was the puzzle-like nature of the techniques, how every move had a counter and every position had an escape. Or maybe it was the community she found there, people from all walks of life coming together to learn and grow. Her first instructor, Professor Martinez, had been patient and encouraging. Under his guidance, she had progressed steadily through the belt ranks. White belt had been all about survival, learning not to panic when someone was on top of her. Blue belt brought understanding as the techniques started to make sense and connect together. Purple belt, which she had earned just 8 months ago, felt different. She wasn't just learning techniques anymore, she was developing her own style and teaching newer students. As she wrote down her experience level, she felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Starting at a new gym was always intimidating, even with years of training. Every academy had its own culture, its own way of doing things. She hoped this place would be welcoming and that she could find training partners who would help her continue improving. The sound of footsteps made her look up from the paperwork. A man was walking toward the front desk from what appeared to be an office area. He was probably in his early 40s with a stocky build that suggested years of training. The black belt around his waist confirmed he was likely one of the instructors. His hair was starting to show some gray at the temples, and he carried himself with the confidence that came from years of being in charge. As he got closer, Zara noticed his eyes scanning the waiting area before settling on her. There was something in his expression that she couldn't quite read, but it made her slightly uncomfortable. "Derek," Kelly called out to him. "This is the trial student for tonight's advanced class." Derek nodded and walked over to where Zara was sitting. She stood up to introduce herself, extending her hand for a handshake. His grip was firm, maybe a little too firm, as if he was testing her. "So you want to train with the advanced group?" he asked, his tone neutral, but somehow not entirely friendly. "What's your background?" Zara straightened her shoulders slightly. She had learned over the years that confidence was important when meeting new instructors. "I've been training for 6 years. I earned my purple belt under Professor Martinez at Pacific Northwest Academy in Portland." Derek's eyebrows went up slightly, and she caught what looked like a smirk starting to form at the corner of his mouth. "Purple belt, huh? That's quite impressive for someone so young. Martinez, you said? Can't say I know him." There was something in his tone that bothered her, but she couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was. "He's been teaching for over 20 years. The academy has a really good reputation in the Pacific Northwest." "I'm sure it does," Derek replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Well, we'll see how you handle training here. Sometimes what passes for advanced at one school is basic at another. Standards can vary quite a bit from place to place." Zara felt her jaw tighten slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. She had encountered this kind of attitude before. Some instructors like to establish dominance early to make new students prove themselves. It was annoying, but not unusual. "I understand," she said simply. "I'm looking forward to training and learning from everyone here." Derek nodded, but she could tell he was still sizing her up. "The advanced class can be pretty intense. We train hard here and we expect commitment from our students. Are you sure you're ready for that level?" The question struck her as odd. Why would someone sign up for an advanced class if they weren't ready for it? But she simply nodded. "I'm ready." "Good," Derek said, turning to head back toward his office. "Class starts in about 15 minutes. Kelly will show you where to. Change and get ready." As he walked away, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something about the interaction had been off. Maybe he was just being cautious with a new student. Maybe he had dealt with people who overestimated their abilities before. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Kelly showed her to the changing area, which was clean and spacious. Zara changed into her white guy, the uniform worn for Jiu-Jitsu training. As she tied her purple belt around her waist, she felt the familiar sense of preparation that came before training. The belt was faded and frayed at the edges from years of use, each mark a memory of countless hours on the mats. Walking back out to the training area, she could see other students arriving for the advanced class. They were a mix of ages and sizes, all wearing their GIs and chatting quietly as they prepared for training. A few nodded at her in acknowledgement, the universal greeting between martial artists. The mats were pristine, clearly well-maintained and cleaned regularly. The space was open and bright, with good lighting and ventilation. From a technical standpoint, the academy seemed top-notch. She just hoped the training environment would be as welcoming as the physical space appeared. As 7 o'clock approached, more students filtered onto the mats. Derek emerged from his office, now wearing his gi with the worn black belt that marked him as the head instructor. He clapped his hands together to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone, let's get started," he announced. "We have a new trial student joining us tonight. Why don't you introduce yourself?" All eyes turned to Zara, and she felt the familiar flutter of nerves that came with being the center of attention. "Hi, everyone, I'm Zara. I just moved here from Portland, and I'm looking for a new place to train. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about 6 years." There were murmurs of welcome from several students, which made her feel a bit more at ease. At least the other students seemed friendly, even if the instructor had been somewhat cold. "Zara says, she's a purple belt," Derek added, and again she caught that subtle tone that suggested skepticism. "We'll see how she fits in with our group." The comment felt unnecessary, but Zara pushed the feeling aside. Maybe she was being too sensitive. Starting at a new gym always felt awkward at first. As they began the warm-up, Zara fell into the familiar rhythm of movement drills and stretches. Her body remembered these patterns, and she moved with the fluid confidence that came from years of training. Around her, she could sense some of the other students taking notice of her technique and movement quality. The warm-up progressed through various jiu-jitsu-specific exercises, shrimping across the mat to develop hip movement, forward and backward, rolls to improve body awareness, and technical stand-ups to practice getting back to your feet safely. Zara moved through each drill smoothly, her technique clean and efficient. She began to feel more comfortable as the class continued. This was her element, the place where she felt most confident and capable. Whatever weird energy she had picked up from Derek during their introduction, she could handle it. She had dealt with challenging instructors before, and her skills spoke for themselves. Little did she know that this first class would test not just her jiu-jitsu abilities, but her character in ways she never expected. After the warm-up finished, Derek called everyone to the center of the mats for technique instruction. The students formed a semicircle around him, sitting cross-legged in the traditional way. Zara found a spot toward the back, wanting to observe and learn how this academy taught techniques. "Tonight we're going to work on a guard pass sequence," Derek announced, adjusting his GI jacket. "This is an advanced technique, so I want everyone paying close attention." He motioned for one of the senior students, a tall guy with a brown belt, named Rick, to help demonstrate. As Derek explained the setup, Zara watched carefully. The technique itself was solid, though she noticed Derek's explanation was a bit rushed in some areas. In her previous academy, Professor Martinez always broke down techniques into smaller pieces, making sure everyone understood each step before moving on. Derek seemed more focused on showing the flashy finish rather than explaining the important details that made the technique work. "The key is to use your weight and pressure," Derek was saying as he demonstrated on Rick. "You can't be gentle with this stuff. You have to impose your will on your opponent." Zara found the choice of words interesting. Most instructors she knew talked about technique and leverage, not imposing your will. But every teacher had their own style of explaining things. "All right, everyone pair up and start drilling," Derek called out. "I want to see clean executions of this pass." The students began moving around to find partners. Zara looked around, waiting to see who might need a partner. Training with different people was one of the best parts of jiu-jitsu. Everyone had different body types and styles, which helped you develop a more complete game. "Hold on." Derek's voice cut through the shuffling of students. "Before you all start, I want to work with our new student personally. I like to assess new people myself to see where they fit in our program." Zara felt all eyes turn toward her. This wasn't unusual exactly, but something about Derek's tone made her slightly uncomfortable. Most instructors would let a new student work with one of the regular students first, to help them feel welcome and get comfortable. "Sure," she said, standing up and walking toward the center of the mats where Derek was waiting. As they faced each other, Derek had that same smirk from earlier. "Let's see what Portland Jiu-Jitsu looks like," he said, loud enough for the other students to hear. The comment felt unnecessary, but Zara just nodded. She had learned over the years that some instructors liked to test new students, especially ones who came in claiming to have experience. She could handle a challenging training partner. They started with Derek in her guard, the position where she was on her back with her legs wrapped around his waist. This was exactly where the technique he had just demonstrated was supposed to work. Derek immediately began applying pressure, pushing down on her with more force than seemed necessary for a simple drill. "Come on, don't make it easy for me," he said loudly. "I know you people are tough. Show me some of that natural athleticism." The phrase hit Zara like a slap. "You people." The words hung in the air, and she felt several of the other students glance over at them. Her stomach tightened, but she tried to focus on the technique. Derek continued the pass, but instead of demonstrating the clean technique he had just shown, he was using pure strength and weight. He pressed down hard, making it difficult for her to breathe properly. This wasn't technical drilling anymore. This felt personal. "Having trouble breathing down there?" Derek asked with that same smirk. "Maybe you're not used to training with serious athletes." Zara felt her face flush, but she kept her composure. She had dealt with difficult training partners before, though. Usually they were fellow students, not the head instructor. She tried to work the defensive techniques she knew, but Derek was making it unnecessarily difficult. When it was her turn to practice the pass, Derek made his guard incredibly tight and stiff. Instead of allowing her to practice the technique properly, he was making it a strength battle. Every time she tried to execute the move the way it had been demonstrated, he would power out of it. "Come on, you're being too gentle," Derek said loudly. "This is jiu-jitsu, not yoga class. You have to really commit to your techniques." The other students were trying to focus on their own drilling, but Zara could feel some of them watching. Their interaction. The atmosphere in the room had changed. What should have been a welcoming environment for a new student had become something else entirely. Derek continued his commentary as they drilled. "You know, I've seen this before. People come from these smaller schools thinking they know jiu-jitsu, but they've never really been tested. They've been training with people who go easy on them." Each comment felt like another small cut. Zara had trained at a highly respected academy with tough, competitive students. She had competed in tournaments and rolled with visiting black belts. The idea that she had been coddled was not only wrong but insulting. "Let's try it again," Derek said, resetting to the guard position. "But this time let's see some real intensity." As they continued drilling, Derek's comments became more pointed. He questioned whether her previous instructor had been teaching real jiu-jitsu or just showing her the basics. He suggested that maybe she should consider starting in the intermediate class instead of the advanced group. "It's nothing personal," he said during a brief pause. "It's just that we have standards here. We can't have people getting hurt because they're not ready for this level of training." The condescending tone was unmistakable now. Zara realized this wasn't about assessing her skill level at all. This was about something else entirely, something that made her stomach churn with a familiar feeling she had hoped she wouldn't encounter in a place dedicated to martial arts. Around them, other students were drilling the technique properly, helping each other learn and improve. That's what jiu-jitsu was supposed to be about, mutual growth and respect. But Derek seemed more interested in establishing some kind of dominance. "You know what your problem is?" Derek continued as they reset again. "You're hesitating. In jiu-jitsu, hesitation will get you submitted every time. You have to be aggressive, especially if you want to train with the advanced students." Zara had been training long enough to know the difference between appropriate intensity and unnecessary roughness. Derek was crossing that line consistently. When she defended his passes, he acted like she was being difficult. When she worked on her own passes, he made it impossible for her to practice the technique properly. The worst part was how he was doing it all with a smile, making comments that sounded like coaching, but felt like something else entirely. Other students might not even realize what was happening, but Zara felt every subtle insult and veiled comment. "Let's see if you can handle some real pressure," Derek said, resetting to her guard once more. "I want to see how you react when things get tough." This time Derek didn't even attempt the technique they were supposed to be drilling. Instead, he simply drove forward with his shoulder, putting his full weight into her chest and making it hard to breathe. This wasn't jiu-jitsu technique. This was just being a bully. Zara tried to create space and work her escapes, but Derek was making it a pure strength battle. He wasn't teaching or demonstrating. He was trying to overwhelm her physically. The other students were starting to notice that their drilling looked different from everyone else's. "Come on, you're supposed to be tough, right?" Derek said, maintaining the crushing pressure. "Show me some of that fighting spirit I keep hearing about." The comment about fighting spirit was loaded with implications that made Zara's jaw clench. She had heard these kinds of coded language before, the way some people talked about athletes who looked like her. Natural athleticism, fighting spirit, toughness, all ways of reducing her skills and intelligence to stereotypes. Finally, Derek backed off slightly, but his commentary continued. "You know, I think you might benefit from working with some of our intermediate students first. Get a feel for how we do things here before jumping into the deep end." The suggestion was ridiculous. Zara had been training in advanced classes for years. She had successfully competed at purple belt level and had even helped teach lower belts at her previous academy. The idea that she needed to step down to intermediate level was insulting and completely unnecessary. But Derek wasn't done. As they continued drilling, he kept up a steady stream of comments that chipped away at her confidence and comfort level. He questioned her understanding of basic concepts, suggested she had been training incorrectly, and made it clear that he didn't think she belonged in the advanced group. The other students in the class were getting good drilling time, working, with partners who helped them improve and understand the technique. Meanwhile, Zara was stuck with an instructor who seemed more interested in proving a point than teaching jiu-jitsu. All right, that's enough drilling for now, Derek finally announced to the class. Let's move on to some positional sparring. Zara felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that the uncomfortable drilling session was over, but dread about what might come next. If Derek was willing to behave this way during technical drilling, she could only imagine how he might act during live sparring. As the students prepared for the next phase of class, Zara caught a few sympathetic looks from some of the other students. It was clear that at least some of them had noticed that something wasn't right about how Derek had been treating her. She took a deep breath and tried to center herself. She had come here to train jiu-jitsu, and she wasn't going to let one difficult instructor chase her away from something she loved. But she was beginning to realize that this trial class was going to test more than just her technical skills. The real challenge was just beginning. The positional sparring went better than Zara had expected. Derek paired her with other students instead of continuing to work with her himself, which gave her a chance to actually train properly. She worked with 3 different partners, and each round went smoothly. Her techniques were sharp, her timing was good, and she could tell the other students were impressed with her skill level. During her second round, she worked with a blue belt named Tony, who had been training at the academy for about 2 years. As they reset between positions, he quietly said, "Don't let coach get in your head. You clearly know what you're doing." The comment was brief and subtle, but it confirmed what Zara had been thinking. Other people had noticed Derek's behavior during the drilling session. It wasn't all in her imagination. Her third partner was Lisa, a brown belt who had been training for almost 8 years. Lisa was technical and smooth, exactly the kind of training partner Zara enjoyed working with. They had a good back and forth during their round, with both of them successfully executing techniques and escapes. "You've got solid fundamentals," Lisa said as their round ended. "Where did you say you trained before?" "Pacific Northwest Academy in Portland," Zara replied, adjusting her GI top. "Oh, I know that place by reputation. They produce really good students. Professor Martinez is supposed to be excellent." The validation felt good after Derek's earlier comments questioning her background. It was clear that Lisa, who had much more experience than Derek's dismissive attitude suggested, recognized quality training when she saw it. As the positional sparring rounds concluded, Zara felt more confident about her decision to try this academy. The students were welcoming and skilled. The facility was excellent and the training was challenging in a good way, if only the head instructor wasn't such a problem. Derek called the class back to the center of the mats. "All right, everyone. Good work on the positional sparring. Now let's finish up with some free rolling." Free rolling was Zara's favorite part of any jiu-jitsu class. This was where all the techniques came together in live sparring. No predetermined positions or specific techniques to practice. Just pure jiu-jitsu problem solving in real time. "We'll do 6-minute rounds tonight," Derek announced. "I want to see good, clean technique. Control your intensity and take care of your training partners." The students began pairing up for the first round. Zara looked around to see who might need a partner, but before she could make a choice, Derek's voice cut through the shuffling. "Actually, hold on, everyone." Derek walked to the center of the mats, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Since we have a visiting student tonight, I think this is a good opportunity for everyone to see different styles of jiu-jitsu." Zara felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. Something about Derek's tone suggested this wasn't going to be a normal announcement. "Our guest claims to have trained at a pretty well-known academy," Derek continued, that same smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "She says she's been doing this for 6 years and earned a purple belt in Portland." The way he said "claims" and "says" made it sound like he doubted her credentials. Several students looked uncomfortable with where this seemed to be heading. "Now, I'm not questioning anyone's background," Derek said, though his tone suggested exactly the opposite. "But I think we all know that standards can vary quite a bit from place to place. What passes for advanced at one school might be intermediate somewhere else." Zara felt her face getting warm. This was completely inappropriate. In her 6 years of training, she had never seen an instructor publicly question a visiting student's qualifications like this. So I think it would be educational for everyone to see how different training backgrounds compare, Derek continued. Who wants to roll with our visitor first? A few students raised their hands, but Derek shook his head. Actually, I think I should take the honor myself. After all, I'm responsible for maintaining the standards of this academy. The room had gone quiet. Even students who might not have understood the full context could sense that something unusual was happening. This wasn't how trial classes typically worked. I want everyone to watch this round carefully, Derek said, starting to remove his rash guard to reveal a fitted t-shirt underneath. Pay attention to the difference between technical Jiu-Jitsu and what some people call Jiu-Jitsu. The insult was barely veiled now. Zara stood in the center of the mats, feeling the eyes of 20 students on her. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave this toxic environment and find somewhere else to train. But another part of her, the part that had been quietly building throughout the evening, was tired of Derek's attitude. Sounds good to me, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline starting to flow through her system. I'm always happy to roll with the instructor. Derek's smirk widened. Excellent, don't worry, I'll take it easy on you. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt on their first day. The condescending tone was thick enough to cut with a knife. Around the mats, students were sitting down to watch what was clearly going to be more than just a normal sparring round. Zara began removing her G jacket, revealing a simple black rash guard underneath. As she folded her jacket neatly and set it aside, she caught Lisa's eye. The brown belt gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Remember, everyone, Derek announced as he stepped onto the mats. This is about technique, not strength. Though sometimes you have to match intensity with intensity. Derek's GI jacket came off to reveal broad shoulders and thick arms. He was clearly strong, probably outweighing Zara by at least 40 pounds. But Zara had been training long enough to know that size wasn't everything in jiu-jitsu. Technique, timing, and leverage could overcome a significant strength advantage. They approached the center of the mats for the traditional fist bump that started every sparring round. Derek's grip lingered a moment longer than necessary, and his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that felt more like a challenge than sportsmanship. Just remember, Derek said quietly, so only she could hear. Tap early and tap often. I'd hate for you to get embarrassed in front of everyone. Zara looked right back at him, her voice equally quiet but crystal clear. The only person who needs to worry about getting embarrassed is you. Derek's smirk faltered for just a moment, before returning. We'll see about that. The timer started and both fighters moved to the center of the mats. Derek immediately adopted an aggressive stance, clearly planning to use his size and strength advantage from the beginning. His approach was straightforward: grab, pressure, and overwhelm. But Zara had been reading Derek all evening. She had watched him during the technique demonstration, observed his movement patterns during drilling, and most importantly, she had gotten a clear sense of his mindset. Derek was used to bullying people into submission, not outthinking them. As Derek lunged forward for a collar tie, Zara smoothly sidestepped. Her footwork was precise, keeping her just out of range while maintaining perfect distance for her own attacks. Derek's initial rush met nothing but air, and he had to take a step to regain his balance. Come on, Derek said, loud enough for the watching students to hear. Don't just run away, let's see some of that Portland Jiu-Jitsu. But Zara wasn't running. She was hunting. Years of training had taught her to recognize when an opponent was relying too heavily on physical attributes instead of technique. Derek's aggressive approach was leaving him vulnerable, and she was patient enough to wait for the right moment. Derek reset and came forward again, this time with a more measured approach. He reached for her collar with his left hand while attempting to control her sleeve with his right. It was a basic grip fighting sequence, but his technique was sloppy. He was muscling through positions instead of using proper leverage. Zara allowed him to get the collar grip, but immediately countered by securing her own grip on his lapel. This wasn't the grip Derek had expected, and she could see confusion flash across his face for just a moment. That's it, Derek said, trying to sound encouraging but unable to hide the strain in his voice as he realized she wasn't going to be easy to control. Show me what you've got. The watching students were completely silent. They could sense that something significant was happening, though most of them probably couldn't predict exactly what. Derek tried to use his collar grip to pull Zara into a clinch, planning to use his weight advantage to overwhelm her. But as he pulled, Zara moved with him, using his momentum to set up her own attack. Her grip on his lapel shifted slightly, and her free hand found the back of his collar. Derek's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. The grip combination Zara had secured was setting up a technique he clearly hadn't expected. His confident smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "Uh-oh," someone whispered from the edge of the mats. Derek tried to power out of the position, using his strength to break Zara's grips. But jiu-jitsu wasn't about strength. It was about leverage, timing, and technique. And Zara had all three working in her favor. The room held its breath as the two fighters stood locked in their grip battle. Derek was realizing that his usual tactics weren't going to work against someone who actually knew what they were doing. Zara, meanwhile, was calmly setting up what would become the most memorable 14 seconds in the Academy's history. Everything Derek had said about standards and technique was about to be tested in the most direct way possible. The watching students sensed they were about to witness something special, though none of them could have predicted just how quickly it would all be over. The grip battle lasted only a few seconds, but to everyone watching it felt much longer. Derek was trying to muscle his way into a dominant position, pulling and pushing with raw strength. Zara remained calm, her movements controlled and purposeful. She had found exactly what she was looking for. Her left hand had secured a deep grip on Derek's collar, right at the base of his neck. Her right hand controlled his left lapel, creating the perfect setup for what was coming next. Derek was so focused on trying to overpower her that he didn't realize he was walking directly into a trap. "Come on," Derek grunted, trying to use his weight to drive forward. "Stop stalling and let's see some real jiu-jitsu." Zara said nothing. Her focus was complete, her mind calculating angles and timing. This was the moment she had been waiting for all evening. Every condescending comment, every dismissive look, every attempt to make her feel unwelcome had led to this instant. Derek made his final mistake by committing fully to a forward drive, putting all his weight behind an attempt to bulldoze through Zara's guard. The moment his weight shifted completely forward, Zara moved. Her right foot stepped across Derek's body as she spun to her left, using his momentum against him. Derek's eyes widened as he realized what was happening, but it was already too late. Physics had taken over, and there was no stopping what came next. The technique was beautiful in its simplicity. As Zara spun, she maintained her grips on Derek's collar while simultaneously wrapping her right arm around his neck. Derek's feet left the ground as his own forward momentum carried him up and over Zara's hip. The throw happened so fast that most of the watching students barely processed what they had seen. One moment Derek was driving forward trying to establish dominance, and the next moment he was airborne, completely out of control. They hit the mat with a solid thud, Derek landing hard on his back with Zara landing in perfect position beside him. But the throw was only the beginning. Before Derek could even process what had happened, Zara was already transitioning to the submission. Her right arm, which had been around Derek's neck during the throw, immediately adjusted to secure a deep grip on his far shoulder. Her left hand, still controlling his collar, provided the leverage point she needed. Derek tried to sit up, but Zara's positioning made it impossible. "What the?" Derek started to say, but his words were cut short as Zara's technique locked into place. The submission was a modified Kimura, a shoulder lock that attacked the joint through leverage and rotation. Zara's execution was flawless. Her grip on Derek's shoulder was deep and secure. Her body position gave her maximum leverage, and Derek's own attempts to escape only made the technique tighter. Derek's face went from confusion to concern to genuine alarm in the span of about 2 seconds. He could feel the pressure building in his shoulder as Zara applied the technique with surgical precision. This wasn't the sloppy, strength-based grappling he was used to. This was high-level jiu-jitsu, technique executed by someone who clearly knew exactly what she was doing. "Tap," Zara said calmly, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear without causing injury. Derek tried to muscle out of the position, using his strength to resist the submission. But the Kimura was one of those techniques where struggling only made things worse. Every attempt Derek made to power out of the hold only increased the pressure on his shoulder joint. The watching students were completely silent. They had expected to see their instructor easily handle the visiting student. Instead, they were witnessing a technical masterpiece that had taken Derek from standing to submitted in what felt like the blink of an eye. Derek's breathing became labored as he realized the situation he was in. The pressure on his shoulder was building steadily, and Zara's control was absolute. He could feel his shoulder joint approaching its limit, and there was nothing he could do to escape. Tap! Derek finally gasped, slapping the mat frantically with his free hand. The moment Derek tapped, Zara immediately released the submission and moved away from him. Her movements were smooth and controlled, showing the same technical precision that had characterized the entire sequence. She stood up calmly, adjusting her rash guard as if nothing unusual had happened. Derek remained on his back for a moment, staring at the ceiling with a mixture of shock and disbelief. His shoulder throbbed, where the submission had been applied, but more than that, his ego was completely shattered. Everything he had said about standards and technique had just been proven wrong in the most direct way possible. The timer on the wall showed that only 14 seconds had passed since the round began. 14 seconds from the opening fist bump to Derek tapping out in submission. It was the kind of quick finish that usually only happened when there was a massive skill gap between competitors. Slowly, the watching students began to process what they had just witnessed. Someone started clapping, quietly at first, then building as others joined in. The applause wasn't mocking or celebratory in a mean way. It was the kind of respectful recognition that Jiu-Jitsu practitioners gave when they witnessed exceptional technique. Derek finally sat up, his face red from more than just the physical exertion. He looked around at the watching students, seeing their expressions of surprise and respect for Zara's performance. The student he had dismissed and condescended to all evening had just demonstrated a level of skill that left no room for doubt. "Good technique," Derek mumbled, getting to his feet slowly. The words came out grudgingly, as if saying them physically hurt. Zara nodded politely. "Thank you. Good roll." Her response was gracious and professional, showing the kind of character that Derek had failed to display all evening. Even in victory, she maintained the respect and humility that were supposed to be core values of martial arts training. Lisa, the brown belt who had rolled with Zara earlier, stood up from where she had been watching. "That was incredible," she said to Zara. "Where did you learn that combination?" "Professor Martinez taught it to me a couple of years ago," Zara replied. "It's all about timing and using your opponent's momentum against them." The technical discussion that followed was exactly what Jiu-Jitsu was supposed to be about. Students asking questions, sharing knowledge, and learning from each other. Several people wanted to know more about the technique Zara had used, and she was happy to explain the details. Derek stood off to the side, watching the interaction between Zara and his students. He could see the respect and admiration in their eyes as they listened to her break down the technique. This was the kind of technical discussion he should have been facilitating all evening, instead of the ego-driven confrontation he had created. Tony, the blue belt who had encouraged Zara, earlier came over to shake her hand. "That was amazing," he said. "I've never seen anyone handle Coach like that." The comment hung in the air, suggesting that Derek's behavior tonight might not have been an isolated incident. Other students nodded in agreement, indicating that this kind of attitude might have been a pattern. As the immediate excitement died down, Derek tried to regain some control of the situation. "All right, everyone, let's continue with regular rolling. We still have time for a few more rounds." But the energy in the room had completely changed. The students paired up for additional rounds, but the conversations kept drifting back to what they had just witnessed. Zara's technique had been impressive, but more than that, the way she had handled Derek's inappropriate behavior had earned their respect. During the remaining rounds, several students made a point of rolling with Zara. Each round confirmed what everyone had already realized. She was exactly as skilled as she had claimed to be. Her technique was clean, her transitions were smooth, and her understanding of Jiu-Jitsu was clearly advanced. Derek participated in the remaining rounds, but his usual confident demeanor was gone. He rolled with a few students, but there was no more trash talk, no more condescending comments. The 14-second submission had stripped away all his bluster and revealed him for what he really was. As the class wound down, Zara began putting her G-jacket back on. She had originally planned to ask about membership options and class schedules, but the evening had taken a different turn than she expected. Lisa approached her as she was getting ready to leave. "Hey, I trained at another academy across town too. The instructor there is really good and the environment is much more welcoming. You should come check it out." Several other students overheard and nodded in agreement. It seemed that Derek's behavior had been noticed by more people than just Zara, and they were eager to help her find a better training environment. "I'd like that," Zara replied, genuinely grateful for the offer. "Tonight was educational, but I'm looking for somewhere I can actually focus on improving my jiu-jitsu." As the students began filing out of the academy, many of them stopped to talk with Zara. They wanted to know more about her background, her previous training, and her plans for finding a new gym. The conversations were warm and respectful, showing her the kind of community she had been hoping to find. Derek retreated to his office as the students left, avoiding eye contact with most of them. The evening had not gone the way he had planned, and he clearly needed time to process what had happened. Zara was one of the last people to leave the academy. As she walked toward her car, she reflected on the strange evening she had just experienced. She had come looking for a new place to train, and instead had found herself in a situation that tested her character and skills in ways she never expected. The 14 seconds on the mat had been the culmination of everything Derek had put her through during the class. His condescending attitude, his inappropriate comments, and his attempt to publicly embarrass her had all backfired spectacularly. But more than just winning a single sparring match, Zara had demonstrated something important to everyone in that room. She had shown that skill, technique, and character would always triumph over bullying and prejudice. The other students had seen what real jiu-jitsu looked like, and more importantly, they had seen what it meant to handle adversity with grace and dignity. As Zara drove home that night, she felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that she had stood up for herself and demonstrated her abilities, but sadness that such a demonstration had been necessary in the first place. Jiu-Jitsu was supposed to be about respect, learning, and mutual growth. Derek had turned it into something else entirely. The next day, her phone buzzed with messages from several students she had met at the academy. Lisa had sent her the address of the other gym she had mentioned, along with the instructor's contact information. Tony had reached out to apologize for Derek's behavior and to let her know that several students were considering switching academies themselves. The 14 seconds that had ended Derek's attempt at intimidation had started something much bigger. They had sparked conversations about respect, standards, and what a jiu-jitsu community should really look like. And for Zara, they had proven that sometimes the best response to prejudice and bullying is simply to let your skills speak for themselves.